A lie is like a snowball. It starts off small and then grows and grows until the point where it gets so big it falls apart and the truth is discovered. That is a quote by Chris Hughes. More on lies and truth with Rob Morse next.
But if you own a gun in California, you should have an attorney that specializes in California gun laws on your speed dial. Because if you ever have legal matters that involve firearms, you need California's firearm lawyer, John Dillon. Especially if you have questions about red flag laws, gun registration, gun transportation, or maybe you just need to know that your guns are California compliant. Our trusted firearms attorney is John Dillon. John Dillon specializes in California gun laws. Put his number on your phone right now, 760-642-7150. That's John Dillon, California firearm lawyer, 760-642-7150.
Okay, first guest, is my buddy Rob Morse. Rob, how are you, sir?
I am great. It's been too long, Mike.
It's nice to hear your voice. It is fantastic to have you on the show. Welcome.
My pleasure. It's been great to watch your success. I'm just disappointed that San Diego Gun Owners Radio doesn't have a couple million more listeners. Oh, all right.
We're working on it.
Afternoon.
That's right. We're working on it.
There you go.
We're working on it. So tell everybody, for all those folks who live under a rock and don't know who Rob Morse is, tell them, just introduce yourself. Tell everybody why they should know you.
Okay. I host the Self-Defense Gun Stories podcast. 20-minute snack food of a podcast comes out once a week. I'm a co-host on the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. We try and cover a week's worth of news in an hour and a half, so we have to talk fast. My blog is at slowfacts.wordpress.com, 2,100 articles. Those often get picked up and carried at AmmoLand and OpsLens.
Talk about the first one you just talked about, the self-defense story.
Self-defense gun stories.
Yes, talk about that because I love it.
Well, it got started when I was in San Diego.
Yep.
Because I'd read the news about someone who either couldn't defend themselves, and then I was mad at our sheriff, or did defend ourselves, and we're at a competition or at a training class, and you go, "Hey, did you hear about Grandma?" And one of the instructors said something that was brilliant. In San Diego, this is where the idea came from. Was Grandma lucky or was she well trained? Did she do best practice? Because we can't tell that from what the news reports give us. And that's where I picked up Self-Defense Gun Stories. We look at what our neighbors did to defend themselves and then go, there's so much the news leaves out. What would we like to do? What would we like our students to do?
There are so many statistics. There's so many. There's so much information to get out there. One piece of information I always try to get on the air whenever I'm interviewed by anybody. Doesn't matter. One piece of information I always repeat and try to get on air is the fact that studies show, surveys, studies, scientific studies show that between 1 million and 3 million times per year, an American uses a gun to stop or prevent a violent crime. And I don't think we talk about that nearly enough.
You're absolutely right, because when you bring the news about armed defense to people, they go, I can't believe it. That's why I said I started with not enough people listen to your show. You're telling them news they don't get anywhere else. John Lott looked at the media and said, look, if this is how many times a criminal uses a gun, and we look at those news stories, and we look at how many times our neighbors use a gun and those news stories, the news almost never talks about us, and it's not like it's a little distortion, 50%, a factor of 2. How about a factor of 1,000?
Yeah, really. Isn't that amazing?
No, I'm not, Michael. That's not exaggerating.
Yeah, no, I know. It's amazing. I mean, it really truly doesn't get talked about nearly enough. And part of the reason, Rob, I don't know. Tell me if you agree, disagree. I think part of the reason it doesn't get talked about is so if you use a firearm, because most of the time when someone pulls a firearm or they brandish or they whatever they do, if they're stopping a violent crime because they had a firearm, they might just say, "Hey, I got a gun," and it stops a violent crime. That means nothing happened. And for the news to report that nothing happened, they're not going to get a lot of clicks. They're not going to get a lot of viewers.
Right.
That's part of the problem because it's preventing bad things from happening. What does the news do? Well, if it bleeds, it leads. So that's why I think that's part of the problem.
You're absolutely right in the sense that we only press the trigger about 20% of the time. So okay. That went from 1,000 to 1 to 200 to 1. That's still a lot of exaggeration the media's got to hide. Yeah, can I offer you another perspective on it?
Please.
We asked a bunch of reporters if they knew anybody who owned a pickup truck. The answer is no. I'm down in Hurricane Alley now.
Yeah.
The guys who came and saved our rear ends after 2 hurricanes and tornadoes, they weren't driving a Prius.
That's very interesting. They don't know anybody that owns a pickup truck. Jeez.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, come on. You don't have. Well, just go to Ramona. I swear, you'll see one. We don't keep them under a glass cage out there.
Well, and and so they don't. So if someone prevents something from happening, it's not going to make the only time the news reports excitedly about nothing happening is in baseball, right? There's a no, right? I mean that gets a story.
Touché.
Nothing happens in baseball if it's a no hitter, no errors. Oh my gosh, it makes the news. Everywhere else, if nothing happens, well, they don't get reported on. So, Rob, let me ask you.
I just thought it was the first 4 innings you were talking about, but okay, I see what you mean.
What's the worst falsehood popularized by the gun control industry?
Oh, the gun control saves lives. No doubt in my mind at all.
Why is that? Why would that be a falsehood?
Because again, if you and I are in a conversation, we meet somebody they're listening to us as we're in the coffee shop, and we say self-defense saves lives. They go, you must have made that up. And they're 200,000, a little over 250,000 uses by a criminal of a firearm in the commission of a crime each year. And you brought up the number, Michael. The number I've heard is 2.8 million times you and I defend ourselves. So by a factor of 10 to 1, and again, that a lot of those are never make the news because Grandma said, I have a gun. She reaches into her knitting bag, and the guy that broke in her back door goes, whoops, wrong burglary, and runs away. So right there, we've got a 10 to 1 ratio of self-defense being common versus the criminal use of a firearm being rare. And our neighbors don't know it.
Well, the criminal use of a firearm is rare. I mean, it's really rare. And I was talking in the intro segment. I was just on a podcast where I was talking to somebody who's generally not in favor of expanding Second Amendment rights. I guess I don't want to call this person anti-gun because it was far more nuanced conversation. But he was talking about how there really just there are hundreds of criminals in San Diego County. There's 3.5 million people. There are hundreds of criminals. Not thousands, hundreds of criminals.
Right.
And that are causing all the problems, that are doing all the drug deals, that are doing all the robberies, that are doing all the murders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are probably about 350, maybe 400,000 gun owners in San Diego County. And therefore, and what happens so often is if, a city council or whatever, county, state, if they come up with some kind of new policy proposal that, hey, here's what we're going to do, they're basically pointing the finger at 350,000 people saying, hey, because a few hundred are doing horrible things, you 350,000 are to blame for it. And in the reality, it's these hundreds. Crime is, especially violent crime and violent crime with a gun, is really very, 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 very rare.
I don't know if we've got time to talk about it. Maybe we'll get to it when we come back.
No, go for it. Keep going. Plenty of time.
Half of all the counties in the U.S. won't have a single murder. 2% of our counties are going to have half of our murders. So I'm just putting the numbers underneath. Absolutely true. Violent crime is rare. Even if you look at violent crime with a gun, the majority of violent crime is done without a gun, 5 out of 6 times. So when they say, we're going to ban guns to stop violent crime, I'm going, okay, even if you disarmed all the good guys, you're going to leave 5 out of 6 of the criminals undeterred, and now we're defenseless. This is just bad math. You don't solve a small problem by creating a bigger one.
Exactly. And if you do, what you run the risk of doing if you, further restrict firearms, carrying of firearms, keeping of firearms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What you run the risk of doing is cutting into those 1 to 3 million people who are not the victims of a violent crime because they were able to defend themselves. And you're doing it in an attempt to stop the very, very few violent crimes. Now, any violent crime is too much violent crime. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But the fact that we're putting these massive requirements and having these, extreme proposals on the 350,000 people in San Diego because of what the 300 or 400 people in San Diego are doing, it's completely ludicrous. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the with the reporting, bias against gun owners.
Let me tease. Part of it's our fault, but I can't blame us. I'm in a shall issue county in a shall issue state. That means I can get a permit. I will neither confirm nor deny in public. But anyway, and it's also an open carry state. When you run the numbers, about 1 out of a dozen adults are carrying in public where that's legally allowed.
In
1 out of a dozen. You go,
in your state, 1 out of a dozen?
No. In the country, 1 out of a dozen.
Oh, wow. That number's gone way up. Wow. Good.
Yes. Yes. And you go, well, why don't I see it? You go, have you heard of carrying concealed? So it's you know what? It's a little bit like the airbag in the front of your car. If anybody that knows what it looks like would rather not know what it looks like. So carrying concealed is a little bit like that. When people get a gun, they go, how do I carry this? You go, the way millions of us do. They go, I've never seen it. Good. Do you put on a fashion show at your gun ball?
We've talked about it. We never have, but I know.
But we can't get Mike an address. But we're working on it. Orange County Gun Owners is dedicated to preserving and restoring Orange County's self-defense rights. If you live in Orange County and want to help defend and restore the Second Amendment, join. OCGunOwners.com/join. Orange County Gun Owners is the Do Something organization to restore and defend the Second Amendment. Volunteer at a shooting social, at a gun shop and tabletop, and help more pro-gun local officials get elected. Save the date. Orange County Gun Prom is May 20th. Become a member today. OCGunOwners.com/join.
All right, we're talking to Rob Morse about the lies.
No. He's talking about a fashion show.
Oh, yeah.
At Gun Prom.
Yeah, well, we haven't
Would
done
you
that
like
yet.
to expand on that, Rob?
Sure. A good friend of ours, Amanda Suffolk,
Yep.
raises money. She's got, well, now I guess technically she's a competitor. She has a radio show of her own, and they train local women as well. And she goes, you know what? We should do a fashion show to show you what's normally hidden. We use all blue guns, no live firearms anywhere, not even real guns, all plastic replicas. Couldn't find a bullet in it if you tried. And she even wrote a book on how to do that if you want to duplicate it. And people who don't carry go, wow, I didn't know people carried that way. I wish we had superstar models. We'd get more publicity. They had to use people like me, poor fools. And then people, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who look like me, and they go, well, if he could do that, I could do that. Mm-hmm. And they're right. When they do it, they'd look a lot better.
And by the way, I never look at another gun show as a competitor. I look at them as a partner, because it would take a lot of gun shows like ours and yours to change the world, and it'll happen, because the more we do this, the more people will get the word out.
There you go.
So you're going to be in a fashion show?
I've been in one 3 times now. By the way, a kilt. I could do a kilt, Michael. If you do a kilt, I'll do a kilt. How's that?
All right, done.
If Michael does a kilt, I will not go to the gun prom. No. I can't even imagine what these little legs of his look like in a kilt.
Oh, you're going to love them.
I'm sure I will. But, wow. There's not much to segue to that, is there?
So now that we've killed the show.
Yeah, now that we've killed the show.
So talk to people about now. We've changing subjects drastically. So,
please,
where can people? Where do you recommend people get the truth? Or, if people aren't following, gun shows, gun blogs, etc., how do you recommend we get the truth in front of people?
I'm so glad you mentioned that. The truth about guns. We've replaced print media with some brilliant websites. They cover fast-breaking news. The truth about guns, bearing arms. Who are the other obvious ones that now escape? Oh, we had Morning Coffee with Craig. Craig DeLuz was doing it for Firearms Policy Coalition. Yep. That was right on YouTube. The same way you get the rest of your news, just type in armed citizen self-defense. You'd be surprised. It's sitting there waiting for you.
Hey, he's running for Congress now. Did you see that yet?
I do.
We're going to have him on in about a month to talk about his run for Congress. I think that's wonderful. I think it's great when gun folks run for office. We actually have a couple of members who are going to be running for office this year. It's going to be a really, really good election season.
Craig has done all the civic things you want someone to do before they run for larger office. He's been on a school board. I think he's been in a leadership position there for a couple of years and doing a great job. When you hear him talk about it, he is so passionate.
He really is. So what are some of the other lies? What are some of the other lies that the gun control we're kind of talking about? We're kind of confusing gun control with media because they're so tightly linked. But let's get back to the actual.
There you go.
Let's get back to the actual gun control groups. What are some of the other lies they tell?
Okay, here's the best one. We need to create more gun-free zones. Now, when you go there and you do understand that 49 out of 50. Okay, if you're from out in the desert, that's 98%. That's almost 100%. Of mass murders are done in gun-free zones. What you might not know is in the last 3 years, honest citizens like you and I who carry where we can, when people attack us where we're allowed to be armed, we stop half the mass murders.
Say that one more time. Say that one more time.
Okay. Sometimes you hear about a guy who carries in a gun-free zone, wasn't technically legal. Often in a mall, he stops a mass murder, and everybody goes, "Ooh, we're glad you're there." But where we are allowed to carry legally, when someone tries to commit a mass murder, ordinary citizens like you and I, Mike, you and I, Dave, we stop it half the time.
That's interesting. So if somebody tries to commit a mass murder in an area that is not a gun-free zone, half the time it's stopped by somebody legally carrying a firearm.
And when people say they can barely believe it, do this with me. Walk into your ordinary mall and now go, if I suddenly shouted, look at all the people who would look at me. If I'm a bad guy, most of them are behind me and I can't pay attention to them. That means I'm a huge target if I'm doing something bad. We forget how geometry works. And I don't really care what weapon it has. Grandma will take a gun out of her purse and shoot the bad guy from behind. Game over.
That's interesting. Wow. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think it is a purposeful lie, or do you think that they believe what they're saying, and you know what I mean? Are they purposefully lying and saying things they know are not true, or do you think that they believe their own BS?
Here's what's true: we all hate the idea of innocent victims being hurt. Their passion is the same as mine, same as yours. They think the solution is to take away the tool And you and I think that now what they haven't done, so that's their motivation. That's the honest part of their motivation. The dishonest part is they didn't look past the headline to say, do gun-free zones work? They're reaching at straws because their heart's broken. Well, my heart's been broken too. I just don't want to see more bodies. Here's another thing they don't know. We've never had a mass murder at a school that had a program of trained and armed school staff.
Wow.
Never. And we've got over 1 million man days of practice with them since Sandy Hook. Remember that horrible attack in Connecticut? What happened is, day after that, school principals across the country called their sheriff, said, I want a guy in uniform in every hallway. And the sheriff said, I can't do that for you. I don't have enough guys. And it turns out a lot of NRA chapters in many states said, we'll help train your teachers, your janitors, your cafeteria workers, your bus drivers. They carry right now because the sheriff knows who he issued a permit to. You've got guys who carry everywhere but on the job at school. And in, 18, 20 states? Don't hold me to 20. They have armed school staff already. And they don't have an accident, and they've never had a mass murder. That's because if you study mass murders, it's hard work. It's ugly things to read. They tell us that they commit mass murder because they want to be recognized. They're tired of being ignored.
Yeah.
They don't want to they would rather die than be a failure. They won't attack where they expect to see resistance. We don't have to stop all of them, but we have to plant the seed of doubt.
There was just that shooting at Covenant Christian School by the person who was trans. They read that person's, the police officers read that person's notes or manifesto or whatever you want to call it. And it turns out that they were planning on a different target, but discovered that target was protected.
Yeah.
And so they said, all right, forget it. I'm going to Covenant Christian School. They don't have any armed guards there.
It's a gun-free zone.
Same thing at the Aurora Movie Theater.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that. What happened? I know I'm familiar with what happened in Aurora, but I didn't know. Talk about that.
The murderer drove past 3 or 4 other movie theaters. They did not have a posted no gun sign. When he went to the one in Aurora, he goes, bingo, this one says guns are forbidden. It's okay. I'll provide my own. Wow.
And that really is, what is it, 96% or something like that of mass shootings happen in a gun-free zone? I mean, it's a really high number.
No, 98. 49 out of 50.
Which is, that's not a coincidence anymore.
That's
you know?
Right.
So do you think that's why they're not releasing that manifesto? Just because of that comment?
Maybe for other reasons. She may have made statements about being part of the trans community, and they don't want to paint that entire community with a huge black brush because of what some nut said.
But they'll paint it the other way with no problem.
Yes. If it were the part about if she were a crazy gun nut, it would have been all over the papers. Sad but true. I wish the media were. On the other hand, Dave, if the media were as honest as we want, you and I wouldn't have a radio show.
I was just gonna say I'd find something else to talk about for 2 hours. I'm serious, man. I mean, it's and when you listen to the media, it's almost you almost want to call them up and say, "Are you listening to what you're saying?"
Right.
I know.
Well, and that's why people need to listen to you. I'm so grateful that occasionally they read me, because the truth is out there. The truth, I think, is now. Tease this one. We only got a minute. I know. I think we're seeing the end of mass murder because so many of us are carrying. The only place they're ever going to try it is in gun-free zones, and I think we're telling the truth on those. I expect those to go away in lots and lots of states.
Yeah. Well, I think you're probably right.
How
do people read and hear and see and
follow
know more about you, Rob?
I host the Self-Defense Gun Stories podcast. I'm a co-host on the Polite Society podcast. My blog is at slowfacts.wordpress.com. From there, my writing is picked up and carried at Ammoland and Opslands. Thank you, gentlemen.
Are you allowed back in California?
For gun prom, I'm allowed back.
All right, we got a dress.
Are you coming?
Picked out
Are you
for
coming to gun prom, Rob? You should. Well, I'm gonna send you a message. Let's get you out here for gun prom. I think that'd be awesome.
We're gonna get him a dress.
That'd be great.
He'll be looking styling. Take care, buddy.
Thanks for watching this clip from Gun Owners Radio. If you're watching mainstream media, you're not getting the truth about guns. Gun Owners Radio is the easiest way to stay on top of the Second Amendment fight, the fight for your self-defense rights. You can watch our live stream on YouTube every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, or if you're in San Diego, AM 1170, FM 96.1, The Answer. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform. Just search Gun Owners Radio and you'll find our show. Like and subscribe to help defend and restore the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.